Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What are we diving into today?
Well, I know a lot of our listeners have been wanting to explore this whole financial independence thing.
Yeah, it's everywhere you look these days, right?
Totally. So we're going to unpack that.
Love it.
We're using excerpts from the updated Your Money or Your Life book.
Oh, a classic for sure. It's really had an impact, helped a lot of people rethink their relationship with money.
That's kind of what we're going for in this deep dive. No get-rich-quick schemes, just trying to gain a better understanding of, well, our own money.
I like it. Practical and I think really important.
For sure. One of the first things that struck me when I was looking through the book was this idea that money equals life energy.
Ooh, yeah. It's powerful stuff, right?
It is, but how does that actually work? I mean, it's not like I'm trading in my actual hours for a new pair of shoes.
Yeah. Well, not directly, but think of it this way. Say you're eyeing up that new phone, top of the line model. Instead of just looking at the price tag, what if you actually took the time to calculate how many hours you had to work to afford it?
Oof, now that would make me think twice.
Exactly. Because that shiny new gadget, that's no longer just an object, right?
Mhm.
It represents a real chunk of your life, of your energy.
Wow. Okay, that landed. I'm already rethinking that online shopping cart I have open.
And that's the whole point. When we start seeing those dollars as the hours of our lives we traded for them, it can really shift our perspective. You begin to ask yourself, was that purchase, that experience, truly worth the time and energy I invested to afford it?
Hmm. Yeah, makes you a lot more conscious of your spending. And speaking of conscious spending, the book talks about this thing called the fulfillment curve. I got to be honest, I'm not a math person, so trying to understand a curve.
Don't worry, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's not saying more money never equals happiness. It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay, good, because that would be a hard sell.
Definitely. The idea is that up to a point, yes, more money can improve your quality of life. Like, think basic needs, food, shelter, having that sense of security, maybe a few fun experiences sprinkled in. But then it kind of levels off. You get to this point where that next big purchase, that next raise, it doesn't actually move the needle on your overall happiness.
It's not about denying ourselves nice things then. It's more about being intentional with our spending.
Exactly. And that's where the book really emphasizes personal values, right? Like it challenges us to actually define what truly brings us lasting joy and satisfaction.
So what does that look like for someone?
Well, ask yourself, is it travel? Is it being creative, spending time on hobbies? Or maybe it's about having the time and resources to deepen relationships. It's different for everyone. But once we figure out what those cool values are, we can start aligning our spending with what truly matters instead of just chasing those fleeting pleasures.
It's about finding that sweet spot, I guess, where our spending is in line with our values and actually helps us build a life that feels fulfilling instead of just cluttered, right?
Right. And I think that leads us perfectly into the heart of the movement that this book really helped inspire, financial independence.
FI, as everyone calls it.
Exactly.
And it's definitely a buzzword these days. Everyone's talking about it. But I have to admit, I'm still a little fuzzy on what it actually means.
Yeah, it's often misunderstood. A lot of people think it's just about early retirement, and while that's a popular path for some, it's not the whole picture.
So what is the whole picture then?
Well, at its core, FI is really about having options. It's about reaching a point where you're not tied to a job just for the paycheck.
Okay, so you have the freedom to choose how you spend your time.
Exactly. Whether that's pursuing a passion project, starting a business, spending more time with family, or even just like taking a break and reassessing what you want out of life.
It's about taking back your time and energy and then deciding how you want to spend those resources. Love it. Now, for those of us ready to get into the practical stuff, what are some actionable steps we can take starting today? Where does the book say we should begin?
Well, they don't sugarcoat it. You have to know where your money's going. They call it monthly tabulation, basically tracking every dollar in and out.
So like facing a mountain of receipts.
Well, it doesn't have to be that intimidating.
Okay, good, because full disclosure, I'm not great at keeping track of receipts.
It does get easier. Honestly, even just a simple spreadsheet or a budgeting app can do the trick.
So it can be digital. See, that's more my speed.
There you go. Think of it like a financial fitness tracker. You're just trying to become more aware of your spending patterns without judgment.
So once we're tracking everything, then what?
Well, the book encourages us to ask ourselves some pretty tough questions about our spending habits.
Yeah, I remember reading through these, and it definitely felt like someone was like shining a light on some of my not so great habits, but in a good way. Like
Yeah.
it made me want to be more mindful.
It's eye-opening, for sure. The first question they hit you with is, Did I receive fulfillment in proportion to the life energy spent?
Whoa, okay, so like really hammering home that money equals time concept.
Right. Was that purchase, that experience, actually worth the time and effort I had to put in to afford it?
Makes you really reevaluate those impulse buys for sure. Like, did I really need that 10th pair of black shoes, or was it just a quick hit of dopamine?
And that ties right into the second question, is the spending aligned with my values?
Well, that's a good one.
It is. We only have so much time and money, right? So it's about making sure we're using those resources on the things that truly matter to
It's
us.
not about deprivation, it's about spending smarter.
100%. It's about aligning our finances with the life that we actually want to be living.
Love that. Okay, hit me with that last question.
All right, here it is. How would my spending change if I didn't have to work?
Ooh, that's a powerful one.
Right. It's like you get this little glimpse into a life where you have complete freedom of choice.
So if money wasn't a factor, what would we do differently? Would we travel more? Maybe finally pursue that creative passion project? Or just, like, spend more time in nature? It really gets you thinking.
For sure. And as we start to answer those questions honestly, we often find that a lot of our spending is actually driven by obligations, societal pressures, or even just plain old inertia, not really what we want.
Oh, it is so easy to fall into those traps.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're tracking our spending, we're asking the tough questions. The book also mentions this visual tool called the wall chart, right?
Yes, the wall chart is awesome.
Tell me more about it.
It's not just about budgeting. It's about actually seeing your progress towards your financial goals month after month.
Okay, so, like, what kind of stuff are we actually putting on this chart?
So each month you track your expenses, your income, and this is the exciting part, your net worth.
Oh, so you actually get to see that number go up, hopefully,
Yeah.
as you save more and pay down debt.
Exactly. It can be incredibly motivating to see that line on the graph trending upwards, like you're literally visualizing your progress.
I could see how that would be really helpful, especially for someone who's more visual. Out of sight, out of mind, right?
Totally. Plus, it can also help you to identify any patterns in your spending. Like you might be surprised by how those small daily expenses add up over time. Or, on the flip side, how much progress you're making towards paying down your debt.
Speaking of which, let's talk about that big, scary D word, debt.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one, and the book doesn't shy away from it.
Does it offer any advice for how to tackle it?
It does. It actually dedicates a whole chapter to debt. And it's not just about the practicalities of paying it off, but also the psychological impact debt can have. Because let's face it, it can be really heavy.
It can make you feel stuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trapped, anxious, like this constant weight on your shoulders.
Been there. It's that nagging feeling you can't quite shake.
Exactly. But the book does offer hope. It lays out a bunch of different strategies, like the snowball method, where you focus on paying off the smallest debts first to get those quick wins. Or there's the avalanche method, where you tackle the highest interest debts first to save money in the long run.
So it's about finding what works best for your own personality and your situation.
Right. Some people thrive on those small victories, and others are more motivated by seeing the big picture numbers change quickly. But either way, that feeling of becoming debt-free, it's incredibly empowering.
You're not chained to those monthly payments anymore.
Exactly. You're free to start directing your money towards what truly matters.
Freedom. That's what this is all about. And that leads us to another important concept from the book, the crossover point.
Oh yeah, the crossover point. Sounds kind of dramatic, right?
It does. So what exactly is this pivotal moment? Fill us in.
It's that magical point where your investment income is actually enough to cover your living expenses. So you no longer need to work for money to sustain your lifestyle.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. And even if you choose to keep working, it's on your own terms, not because you're dependent on that paycheck.
Okay, so how do we actually get to that point?
Mhm.
The book mentions building a cache, right?
It does.
Okay, so when I hear the word cache, I immediately think of, like, buried treasure.
I love that. And honestly, it's a pretty good analogy. Your cash is basically your financial cushion. So it's your emergency fund plus some. It gives you security, peace of mind, and the flexibility to handle unexpected expenses or life changes.
It's that feeling of knowing you're prepared no matter what life throws your way.
Exactly. And the best part is, building a cache doesn't have to be this overwhelming thing. It's really about making those small, sustainable changes to your spending and investing habits over time. Small steps, big impact.
Love it. Okay, so we've talked about the why, we've talked about the how, but I'm sure people are wondering, how do we actually make our money work for us?
That is the million-dollar question, right? And that's where investing comes in. And luckily, this book dives right in.
Does it cover specific strategies?
It does. It talks about a lot of different investment options, from bonds to index funds, even real estate.
Okay, so let's break it down, starting with bonds. What's the deal with bonds? Because I got to be honest, they've always seemed a little boring.
I hear you. They can seem that way. But think of bonds like the reliable friend of the investment world. They typically offer slower growth than stocks, but they're generally considered less risky, especially if you're looking at something like U.S. Treasury bonds.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance between risk and reward.
Exactly. And the book actually talks about laddering your bonds, which basically means staggering their maturity dates. That way you have a consistent flow of income over time. It's like building a financial staircase, if you will.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I can get behind that. Now, what about these index funds I keep hearing about? Are those the key to, like, early retirement or something?
Not necessarily a guarantee of early retirement,
Yeah.
but they can be a really powerful tool.
Now, how do they work?
Well, think of an index fund like a big basket of stocks. Each basket tracks a particular market index, like the S&P 500, for example.
So instead of trying to pick and choose individual companies, you're basically spreading your risk across a bunch of different stocks.
Exactly. You're betting on the overall performance of the market, which tends to go up over the long term.
And what does the book have to say about that strategy?
They actually highlight a lot of the benefits, like index funds tend to have really low fees. They offer built-in diversification because you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, and they have the potential for long-term growth. They even mention this whole group called the Bogleheads.
Wait, bogleheads? Like those little bobbing head dashboard decorations?
Haha, not quite. Although I kind of wish it was that simple. No, the Bogleheads are actually a whole group of investors who really advocate for this approach, investing in low-cost index funds.
So keeping it simple.
Exactly, letting the market do its thing over the long haul.
Okay, I'm intrigued. No need for fancy algorithms or stock picking competitions, just a solid long-term strategy. What else is there? So we've covered bonds, index funds. Anything else out there people could explore?
Well, the book also talks about real estate a bit.
Oh, interesting.
But it's not about like flipping houses or anything like that. It's more about the idea of generating passive income, maybe through rental properties, or even just being more strategic about how you manage your own home.
Okay, so maybe not everyone's cut out to be a landlord,
Right.
but there's still ways to leverage what you've got.
Totally. In fact, there's this one example in the book I thought was really interesting. It's about a woman who decided to rent out a spare room in her house.
Okay, smart.
And that extra income, it helped her to pay down her mortgage way faster.
See, small steps, big impact.
Mm.
I love it. It's all about being resourceful, right? Like finding those creative solutions that work for your life.
Yeah.
Now, the book also touches upon this other idea, local lending. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. Basically, it's about investing directly in your community. So you would be loaning money to, say, small businesses or even nonprofits in your area.
So almost like a micro-philanthropist in a way.
Exactly. It's a way to really align your money with your values and potentially make a difference where you live.
That's pretty cool.
It is. But of course, the book also stresses the importance of like actually doing your research.
Of course, yeah.
Really understanding the risks involved and making sure it aligns with your overall financial goals.
Right. You don't want to just jump into anything without doing your due diligence. So we've covered a lot of ground here today. Any final words of wisdom from your money or your life that really stood out to you?
That's a tough one. There's so much good stuff in this book. I think if I had to pick just one thing, it would be this quote. Consciousness grows faster than inflation.
Ooh, I like that.
It's so good,
Yeah.
right? And for me, it really gets to the heart of what this whole financial independence thing is really about. Because it's not just about accumulating wealth, right? It's about investing in yourself.
In your knowledge, your skills, your relationships.
Yes. All of that. Those are the things that truly appreciate in value over time.
It's about expanding your horizons, not just your bank account.
100%. And I think as our consciousness grows, as we become more aware of what we value, our relationship with money naturally starts to shift too. We realize that true wealth, well, it's not just about how much money you have in the bank. It's about the richness of your experiences, your relationships, the impact you have on the world around you.
It's about living a life with intention, not just chasing after more all the time.
Exactly.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap things up?
Just remember, this whole financial independence journey, it's not about reaching some finish line. There's no magic number. It's about taking those small, sustainable steps, celebrating your progress, and finding what really works for you.
It's about the journey, not the destination. And never be afraid to ask for help along the way.
Yes. There are so many great resources available, whether it's a financial advisor, an online community. You don't have to figure it all out on your own. It's so true. And on that note, we'll wrap things up here. To all our listeners out there, remember you have more control over your financial future than you might think. By taking the time to understand your relationship with money, taking those small but consistent steps, and never stopping learning, you can create a life that's full of freedom, purpose, and abundance. And who knows, maybe you'll even inspire others to do the same.
Now that's what it's all about. Financial independence isn't just about individual empowerment. It can really create a ripple effect, that positive change extends outwards to our communities, even the world.
What a beautiful thought to end on. And until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.